Ever wondered how inheritance works during a divorce in California? Well, let's break it down. In the Golden State, we operate under what's known as community property rules. Generally, this means that assets and earnings accumulated during a marriage are considered jointly owned and, in the event of a divorce, are typically split 50-50. But there's an exception to this rule. Enter the concept of separate property. This is anything you owned before the marriage, or assets you've inherited or received as a gift during the marriage. So, if your great-aunt Edna left you a tidy sum, that inheritance is typically regarded as your separate property. Even in the midst of a divorce, this separate property usually remains with the individual who owns it. So, if you're worried about your ex getting their hands on your inheritance, breathe a sigh of relief. In California, inheritance is generally considered separate property and is not typically divided during a divorce. But are there exceptions to this rule? Well, indeed there can be. In the world of divorce law, things can get messy, especially when separate property like an inheritance gets mixed up with community property. This is what we call commingling. You see, if your inherited money or assets get mixed with your spouse's, it can become subject to division in a divorce. For instance, if you deposit your inheritance into a joint bank account or use it to pay for a family home, it becomes mingled with community property. Once this happens, it can be incredibly challenging to separate it out again. So let's say you inherited a substantial amount of money and then used it to refurbish the kitchen in your marital home. If you were to divorce, your spouse could potentially claim a share of that money, arguing that it became community property when you used it for a shared asset. This is why it's so important to keep your inherited assets separate. If you want to protect your inheritance, you need to avoid commingling at all costs. Keep it in a separate account, don't use it for shared expenses or assets, and make sure you have a clear paper trail showing where the money came from and where it went. So, while inheritance is usually safe from division in a divorce, it's crucial to avoid commingling if you want to keep it that way.